This is The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TVEnthusiast.com. Episode 89, recorded January 5th, 2017. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TVEnthusiast.com. I'm your host and editor-in-chief of TV Enthusiast. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is our keeper of comics here, Will.
Hello.
So today we're going to be talking about our picks for the best shows, scenes, performers, all sorts of weird categories of 2016. So Will and I, we both created our own list. You can see them on our front webpage, TVEnthusiast.com. You can see in two separate articles, Will's picks and Tyson's picks. So if you want to read kind of our real detailed summaries about why we picked what we picked, that's there. But today we're going to be going over the same categories that we use. We're going to talk about the picks that we made and also some of the other shows that we think were in consideration or deserve a mention at least. So let's kick things off right away. So we're going to start off with Best Technical Production. This is one of the categories where Will and I agreed right down the line, which was Game of Thrones. It's hard to beat Game of Thrones on a technical production these days. They're so far ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Game of Thrones has an unfair advantage. I wish they just have a huge budget. HBO,
bags of money.
Yeah, HBO graces them with such a big budget that, yeah, they can beat everybody on a technical level because, and that's really what it's about. It's not fair to compare it to, say, something like, Legends of Tomorrow, which is running on a tiny CW budget, so
it's Canadian export budget.
It's kind of an unfair award, but then again, it's like a lot of shows can do so much even with a smaller budget. So it's not just that Game of Thrones has all this money to do this stuff. They take what they have and they do it well as well.
Oh, they do so much with what they have. I mean, especially this year with the Battle of the Bastards, which we're gonna get to later on this list as well, of course. But yeah, I've never seen anything like that on TV before.
Yeah, me neither.
It was just like craziness. It was like on the level of watching like Braveheart or something. It was insane. I never thought we'd see TV get like that high in production value, so that was just crazy. I remember in the first season of Game of Thrones where there was this huge battle, but they like didn't even show any of it. Like they had like Tyrion get knocked out so they didn't have to explain it.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of cut back afterwards and it was all like a budget constraint thing. And then here we have like the Battle of the Bastards and this is like Braveheart level stuff.
Yeah, this is like film level stuff.
Yeah, it's just amazing. It's hard to compare. We did say Game of Thrones has a huge budget, but there were some other shows that had pretty good budgets too. And, they did pretty well for themselves as well. Westworld did a really good job with their budget, with their production. The Expanse probably had a much smaller budget than both of those and did a lot.
Yeah,
with what
I
they
don't
had.
think Sci-Fi has a lot of money to invest in new shows like HBO money. So yeah, they a lot of really good production values on TV. But man, Game of Thrones is just you can't dethrone the king, Yeah. Next up, we're going to be talking about Best Artistic Production. Here I picked Stranger Things. I think for me, the thing that sets Stranger Things up is my pick was the amount of like iconography in the series, like the amount of things that are now iconic of Stranger Things that you see and you're going to go, oh, Stranger Things, like Christmas lights. Yeah. Yeah, I like Christmas lights. Like they made Christmas lights iconic to Stranger Things now, which is pretty cool in my opinion.
It's just, yeah, I mean, there's so much just to like, even like the look of Eleven with her being bald and that weird dress with the jacket over it. It's like all those kind of things are like these iconic images that stick in my head now. And, that's like their own stuff. You go beyond that and you go to like the really clear cut, homages to like, E.T. and, The Thing and stuff like that. That's stuff from the 80s that are in there where they're like straight shots that are almost like framed exactly the same. And the amount of work they put into really making Stranger Things look like something from the 80s, I think is phenomenal. And so that was my pick. Will, you picked Westworld, which was another one of the ones that we had up for technical production as well. Mm-hmm. Also an amazing show. Also want to note, since we didn't have like a music category or anything, that the music for Westworld is done by the same composer who works on like Game of Thrones and stuff. That's why the opening theme is so good. But yeah, explain a little bit about your pick for Westworld.
Okay, so Westworld, well, basically, a lot of the same reasons you went with Stranger Things as I went with Westworld, because
the iconography and
the iconography, like the robot, like there's a shot in the opening credits where you see the robot being made. It's being dipped into like this white substance.
Oh, like the Da Vinci.
Like the Da Vinci, like that in itself is iconic. And then the way like it recreates like the Old West, you know, it's just crazy. It's just crazy good. Like the whole artistic direction of that. Like, and also all the shots are just gorgeous.
Yeah, everything is very well framed.
It has like this dream-like quality to it. You know what I mean? It's very dreamlike.
Yeah, some credit goes to the editing on there too. That show had amazing editing. It would cut back and forth, especially when like Dolores was on scene, where like you weren't quite sure like what timeline she was in at any given moment. So that was really cool. Westworld had awesome art direction as well. Like you said, the iconography of like the white like robots when they're made out of like the biological material and in the Da Vinci pose was really cool.
The main thing is how dreamlike the whole thing is. And how so good it's playing. It's so surreal. That I think that's what tipped it over for me.
So other shows we put up here for consideration. Game of Thrones, which won for Best Technical, also has great art direction. It's kind of hard to pick Game of Thrones though, just because, you know, this is all stuff we've seen because this is season 6, you know, of the show. So we're not like getting a lot of stuff that's really new in this season. It's just more great art direction, you know, more great portrayals of like the way the White Walkers look and the Army of the Whites and the dragons. Everything is so detailed and cool looking. But it's all stuff we've seen.
Yeah, it's all stuff we've seen. Yeah, it's harder to go with Game of Thrones for best artistic production for this year because a lot of it is, you know, this show has been on for 5 seasons, so a lot of it is stuff that we've seen before. A lot of it is nothing new. I mean, it's fantastic. It's as fantastic as it's been.
I also put up the Magicians and the Expanse as ones to talk about. The Expanse we put up for technical production as well, but both of them had really cool kind of like settings, like set design for the stuff. I mean, the Magicians, when you get to Fillory, is really cool looking. The Expanse, just with like the where the Belters live and stuff, and the amount of detail that went into the design of that was really cool. And I just like the way the Belters themselves look, like they're like so long and skinny because of gravity.
Because of gravity. That's a really nice touch.
Yeah. And then the OA, which I don't believe you've seen, right? It's a new Netflix series.
I literally do not know almost nothing about this. You say the OA and I'm
it's such an artsy-fartsy show that I had to give it a nod for art direction because it's gorgeous. I mean, there's so many shots in that are just breathtaking. Really, really good. Artistic show, very, I don't know. It's divisive though. The series is divisive as a whole because a lot of people had a lot of problems with the ending, you know, some people didn't, but, I definitely think it's worth a watch if people want to check it out. And the gorgeous scenery alone, like when it'll cut to like some weird shot, like out in this open area, it's just like gorgeous. It's stunning. Now we're going to move on, best writing. So, Will, your pick was Stranger Things, which I can't argue with. I love Stranger Things. For many of the same reasons why I listed for art direction, you put for writing and just like really bringing to life the period that it takes place in.
Right. Because like you said, for art direction, of course a lot of that is in the art direction, but then a lot of it is also in the writing because the writing has to be true to the period as well. You can't just have 80s dressing and then have one of the characters make a reference to Taylor Swift or something, you know, then you know, the writing's failed. child. You know, you can't talk about his badass Xbox.
They can't act like millennials, even though the kids are millennials.
Yeah, you can't. Exactly. So the writing also has to create that illusion that this is the 80s. Both the artistic production and the writing have to be on point. So that's where that comes from.
Mm-hmm. My pick for best writing went to Rectify, which just finished its fourth and final season. Rectify is one of those shows that, like, critics love the show and, like, nobody else has even heard of it. It's just one of those shows, like, people just have no idea what Rectify is. Such a good show. It's from some of the producers.
Guilty. I really don't.
Yeah. It's from some of the producers of, like, Breaking Bad and stuff. It's really good. To me, it has, like, the best writing I've seen on TV since Deadwood, where, like, Deadwood had, like, Victorian, like, writing style that had, like, that pentameter to it, you know, that was, like, really weird and just so interesting. Rectify, just the writing is so poetic and yet somehow, like, naturalistic at the same time. It's just a very strange combination. And it's just such a good show. The way it deals with, like, kind of heavy emotions, but, like, in ways that aren't necessarily normal or like the standard way you'd look at things. So I don't know. Rectify was my pick. Some other shows we brought up for consideration: Better Call Saul, Game of Thrones. I mean, this was the season where they went off book for the most part. They had to kind of create their own things. Westworld, which, you know, we've talked about Westworld having some problems. I think that's mostly in the plotting, though. I think the actual writing was on point. It was more like just kind of, they hit a certain point halfway through where the plotting was a little uneven. Certain motivations weren't necessarily right on, but the actual writing, the dialogue was good. Orange is the New Black continued to be good this season, probably the best season the series has had. And then, so that's pretty much it for best writing. Let's move on to best performer. So my pick for best performer was Aidan Young, who played Daniel Holden, the main character in Rectify.
I do not know what Rectify you keep mentioning is.
Just a really good show. And
just made this show up.
He's an interesting character because he's somebody who's been on death row since he was like 18. So he's been on death row since he was 18. He gets out of prison because he's exonerated. And then, you know, it's all the kind of trouble fitting back in and stuff. And just the way he plays it, he has this kind of like anxiety to him, or this inability to kind of fit back in with society, is really well done. It's been that case for all of the seasons, but in this season with him kind of reaching certain points of closure on certain issues, it's really interesting to kind of see the way he learns to kind of open up or like where he still struggles and stuff. It's really just a strong performance. Your pick was Rami Malek as Elliot Anderson in Mr. Robot. Have to say, I definitely considered him as well. I think there's a very good chance that he's going to be a top runner for a lot of awards.
He won the Emmy this year. So I mean, I have a pretty strong case behind it.
Yeah, Rami Malek is great. And I think we've mentioned it before when we talked about the Golden Globe nominations.
Yeah.
Where we were talking about how, this season of Mr. Robot has really opened things up for both Rami Malek's portrayal, but also for like Christian Slater's portrayal, because as they've gotten into the whole like multiple personality angle, there's so much more room for them to explore in the characters.
Exactly. Like they really couldn't explore this in the first season because that was the big reveal at the end of the season, if that was a thing. The entire first season ran as if Mr. Robot and Elliot were separate characters.
Mm-hmm.
But now that that's out of the way, that we know they're the same person, we got to explore that duality to Elliot's character, and that's what makes Elliot such a more interesting character in season 2 than he was even in season 1. And also that's why that's also elevated Rami Malek's performance, because now he has to portray a character who knows that he is two separate personalities, who, you know, has full knowledge of that. He's no longer simply just playing Elliot, but he's playing a version of Elliot that knows that he's also Mr. Robot, trying to deal with that reality. So it's definitely a much stronger performance.
Yeah, definitely. Rami Malek knocked out of the park. I gotta say also that we have a scene we're going to be talking about later on in the podcast, that's kind of like a very comical scene. And what's so impressive about it is that Rami Malek's performance in it made it kind of like haunting, even though it was like a comedic scene at the same time, even though it was so ridiculous.
Even though it's so ridiculous, so comedic, it's still haunting thing, because at the end of the day, the show is still Mr. Robot.
Mm-hmm.
And so even in that most surreal moment, funny moment, it's still haunting. It's still ominous, because that's what Mr. Robot is at its core.
Mm-hmm. So some of the other performances we wanted to bring up, Melissa Benoist for her role as Kara / Supergirl in Supergirl. Even though we normally wouldn't consider like performances from like the Arrowverse shows, they're not necessarily the strongest.
Yeah, they're pretty. Most of those they're pretty trite performances. Nothing against like these actors and these shows or anything, but they're not performing Emmy award winning work here.
Yeah, this isn't Shakespeare.
I would honestly say the best actor on The Flash is actually the guy who portrays Joe, because I think he does an excellent job. He puts so much feeling into that character, and I don't think anybody else on that show is even on his level, to be honest.
Yeah.
As much as I like Grant Gustin, I think he's a great guy. What he's doing is not very difficult. And the reason I would suggest Melissa Benoist is because she really does something special, in which she has like so much energy and enthusiasm that she puts forth in this character.
Relentless positivity.
This relentless positivity, which is ideally what Supergirl and Superman is all about. But she really turned it up to 11. She has this when she's playing her alter ego Kara, who's supposed to be like Clark Kent. She's supposed to be dorky or so. She does this with like such lovable, goofy, affable charm. And then even in the more dramatic moments, she really sells it. I think that shows the fact that I think she really has taken the role and elevated it probably beyond the writing of the show, which is, for me, it's pretty remarkable, especially on a CW show. So I think that just points to she's a strong actress, and I think that shows when you're watching it.
We also had 3 other performers that we wanted to give a little bit of credit to, all from the show Westworld. Anthony Hopkins is Robert Ford, Ed Harris is the Man in Black, and Evan Rachel Wood is Dolores.
Westworld, it's so unfair. They really stack the cast with like the best actors, working in Hollywood, to have worked in Hollywood. Ed Harris and Anthony Hopkins we're already legends by this time. I mean, come on, you can't help but expect great performances from these two, because I mean, the only way you're going to get a bad performance out of Anthony Hopkins is if he just doesn't give a shit.
If he just phones it in, yeah.
Yeah, if he just phones it in.
Let's transition right now, to the best ensemble cast, because Westworld was our winner, so we can just keep going.
Yeah. So that actually transitions to the best ensemble cast, because when you get all these fantastic actors together, and when they put in the work, you get the best ensemble cast, because it's like,
I really loved the scene between Anthony Hopkins and Ed Harris when they first encountered each other.
Oh my god, that was so tense. Oh man, that should have been like tensest scene, but it wasn't tense enough.
Yeah.
It was
still so good though, just the performances. They're kind of spitting venom back and forth at each other. It was kind of like amazing. And in such different ways too. Ed Harris was so like, they're both these very intelligent characters, but Ed Harris is kind of like spitting his venom openly, whereas like Anthony Hopkins is like kind of like sticking in some subtle jabs,
Yeah.
And so it's almost like this weird boxing match between the two that's like verbal. But that was just fantastic.
When that encounter happened, I was so happy. That was the one encounter I was like most anticipating watching the show up to that point. And it did not disappoint when it happened.
Lots of other great scenes from the cast as well. I really like the scenes between Dolores and William, Dolores and the Man in Black as well, Bernard and Dr. Ford. So many great performances, so many great performers.
Oh yeah.
So
this is just amazing.
So we both kind of like, there was like no other real pick for best ensemble cast. And there's some other great picks, but I mean, it's hard to go toe to toe with what Westworld put on the table.
Again, it's almost like Westworld is cheating, because they stacked the cast with all these amazing actors. They were clearly willing to spend a premium on talent.
Some of the other picks we brought up, Game of Thrones, of course, has a fantastic cast that, keeps continuing to perform strongly and, adds on like little performances here and there from new people, returning people that we haven't seen in a season or two. We got Walter Frey back, great actor, David Bradley playing him. It's great stuff on Game of Thrones, as always. Just not quite, it doesn't have those huge performances out in the forefront like Westworld. Stranger Things, new show. You got Winona Ryder, who's great. You got, a few other, of the adult roles are good, but what really is strong in the ensemble there are the kids in Stranger Things and the kind of like relationship they pull off and how much they feel like they're of that era and how much they nailed that kind of like the Goonies trope of that gang of kids,
Right.
Amazing work there. And of course, Millie Bobby Brown, who played 11, is going to be like a huge star.
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally.
Orange is the New Black continues to be really, really strong. More so this season, I think, than before even, with its cast. The Expanse, great cast as well. You got Thomas Jane in this one. Amazing. Lots of good people. Lots of, like, great people in, like, really tiny roles, Jonathan Banks was in, like, an episode. It's like, what? It's like he was, like, this kind of respected leader, and then we saw him cross-dressing, and all of a sudden he was crazy, and that was it. That was, like, his whole appearance in it, I
was like, what?
The Magicians had a great ensemble cast as well. It kind of feels like high-end CW, like as far as like the cast on that, like it's not something where you're going to go like, man, these actors are like amazing, but they do such a good job of putting it together. Yeah. Of like making the world feel like believable. I really like the actor who plays Elliot in The Magicians. He's really kind of dry and I think he's really good.
I think he's really good. I do like Quentin. Initially, it's funny because initially I wanted to hate him for being yet another pretty boy nerd, but then as a series, he grows on you.
He's so pathetic that you start to like him.
He's so pathetic that you start to like him. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that cast is one that kind of grew on me. Like Penny just seemed like a very generic kind of character type at first, and then like you start to kind of like him as it goes on, and you start to kind of relate to how he has to deal with like Quentin being such a dork.
I really like that relationship between him and Quentin because he just couldn't stand Quentin at all, and it was like very funny every time.
So next up we have Best Showrunner. So Will's pick for Best Showrunner was Matt and Ross Duffer, the Duffer brothers for Stranger Things.
Before I made that pick official, I went and I looked up what the Duffer brothers did in the past. It turns out not very much.
They kind of popped up almost out of nowhere.
Yeah, they worked on some series, I guess. I don't think it was a very good series. I forgot what it was.
It was the M. Night Shyamalan one, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was the M. Night Shyamalan Twin Peaks wannabe series.
Yeah.
I never literally watched it. I don't think it was good.
I watched like one episode of it. It was alright, but it wasn't like, I don't know. It didn't really demand a lot of attention.
Right. Oh yeah, it did demand a lot of attention. Yeah. I just read the synopsis and it just sounded like it wanted to be Twin Peaks. And I'm like,
Pretty much.
And so for that to literally be the only thing they worked on, and then they go and they make Stranger Things. That kind of tipped over for me because it's like these guys are still pretty much amateurs and they freaking, your first run at the rodeo and you knock it out of the park. I mean, come on, respect. Seriously.
So my pick for Best Showrunner, was kind of like in the same role as Matt and Ross Duffer last year, which is Sam Esmail for Mr. Robot, who, like the Duffer Brothers, he didn't really have that much that was so notable to his name. And then with Mr. Robot, all of a sudden he's like a house name. Everybody knows who he is now. He's getting just, constant. In covering like news stories, I think in 1 week I was taking notes on like 2 or 3 shows that he was helping develop, for like Universal, because he's like their new golden boy.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I picked Sam Esmail for Mr. Robot. I know a lot of people took issue with season 2 of Mr. Robot and kind of the departures it made from season 1, and now they kind of went into the more darker, like esoteric territory.
As much as I like Mr. Robot, I still feel like it has issues, some issues that kind of prevent me from just going, yeah, Sam Esmail is like the best showrunner, because some of the things he does like really grates on me or annoys me. I think the whole Elliot like is really in prison thing kind of like annoyed me. The reveals that Elliot and Mr. Robot were two different people annoyed me when it happened. So I don't know. I have like this kind of love-hate relationship with Mr. Robot. I'm sorry.
So it's interesting though that you know, with Sam Esmail, you have this guy that was often criticized and praised at the same time for like kind of like ripping off a lot of things, you know, most notably like Fight Club, you know, and taking a lot of like story beats from that. And you know, he kind of was like open about it. He's like, yeah, he's like, I ripped that off, you know. It's like I wanted to tell a story like that, and why not, you know? And I think a lot of people gave praise to him as well for doing that, just because he did it well. It didn't feel like a cheap knockoff.
It didn't feel like, I mean, no, respect to him for that. I don't rip on him for like doing like a Fight Club ripoff, because my opinion is everything we like a lot of the best stuff in pop culture is just they took from other pieces of pop culture, and you kind of it's just borrowing things, putting them together, and making something that's your own. Which
I mean,
totally
look what Lost
legit.
copied from Gilligan's Island.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look what the Magicians did. The Magicians is basically Harry Potter, you know.
Harry Potter and Narnia.
Harry Potter and Narnia. If you want to be like that, you know, you could just say, well, this is just a Narnia and Harry Potter ripoff. And
but what's interesting,
you can just dismiss it, but then you're kind of like, you know, you're kind of locking yourself out of like a good show if you do that.
But what's interesting is that's what Sam Esmail became known for last year when Mr. Robot came out. This year, that's like the same thing that like Matt and Ross Duffer are known for, because there's so many clear homages to like E.T. and The Thing and The Goonies, and so it's kind of weird that our two picks like kind of like hit the same like criticism / praise points.
It is interesting, isn't it? The other thing I want to point out regarding The Magicians and this is that, and guess what? The Magicians is wholeheartedly a Harry Potter ripoff, because the author of the original novels started writing them because he didn't want to wait for the next Harry Potter book to come out. So it's literally that. So, I mean,
I think I'm about to write a hit book series because of the extra long wait for Game of Thrones.
Yes. Although it's going to be like an extra long wait for your version. So. I'm just gonna walk around and tell people I have this amazing fantasy novel I'm writing, and then never write it and be more popular than George R.R. Martin.
So some other ones we considered in the best showrunner category is Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould for Better Call Saul. Vince Gilligan, of course, also was the showrunner on Breaking Bad. He still has it. Better Call Saul just has those touches, the same touches that Breaking Bad had. You know, he's really good. Vince Gilligan is really good at Chekhov's gun, which is the idea of like putting something out there in the open, like an object, and very clearly letting the audience know that this is going to serve some point of importance later on, and then kind of drawing attention back to it constantly. And then when it comes into play, it's like it has this huge dramatic effect on you. And I think Vince Gilligan is kind of like the master of that. And so he's continuing to do that in Better Call Saul. It's continuing to kind of have that same feel, while in some ways being a very different show. So I think the two of them have worked really well on Better Call Saul. And then, of course, David Benioff and D.B. Wise for Game of Thrones, who this is their first like kind of off-book season. Nearly everything that happened in the season has not happened in the books.
Right, that's true. They started having to go off of not original material, I guess, supposedly stuff George R.R. Martin told them was going to happen, or stuff that George R.R. Martin suggested to them. They
even got some stuff in that came out in like sample chapters like this year.
Yeah.
And they like fit it in.
Look, Game of Thrones as a TV series is going to be done by the time Winds of Winter comes out. I think everybody needs to accept that.
Maybe not before Winds of Winter comes out, but definitely before the last book comes out, which is
we only have
two
more seasons of Game of Thrones left. The next season,
I think Winds of Winter is going to come out this year.
You think it is?
Yeah, but there's still another book.
I'm going to call you on that next year.
But there's still another book.
There's still another book, yeah.
So even if Winds of Winter comes out, there's still another book, and that's definitely not going to be out before the last season of Game of Thrones. Like, I think Winds of Winter is basically going to cover, like, basically what we just saw this season, this last season, season 6. Like, that's about the material it's going to cover. Like, what we're seeing next season is, like, completely off book. You know, there were still a few little things that were still on book, this season. There's, like, nothing left that's, like, on book for the next couple seasons. So, but yeah, I mean, they made that transition. It's a rough transition to make when a show kind of diverts from the book material. Sometimes it works really well, sometimes not so much.
We'll see how it works. So these guys are definitely going to be in the unenviable position of being the people to end the story of A Song of Ice and Fire before the original author of the story was able to do it.
Kind of a rough spot, but
yeah.
It's still cool though. So
I don't think they even like realized they would be in that position when they started making
not at all. But I'm so glad that these two are the ones to do it because they've done fantastic work.
I think they've done exactly. It's been an amazing ride. I'm looking for. I know this season coming up isn't the last season. I know that's next season after this season, but I know we are coming up to the end of the series, and it's been an amazing ride.
You only got 13 episodes left.
Yeah, 13 episodes left. Yeah, if you take it to like where a regular season is 10 episodes.
Yeah, and a regular season of a regular show like Daredevil is like 13 episodes.
Yeah, so really we only have like one season of Game of Thrones left, but they're just doing what they do and they chop it into two to like stretch it out. I think AMC was guilty of that with Mad Men and
they did that
Breaking
with,
Bad.
Yeah, definitely. There was like a year between the two halves of the last season.
Yeah,
of Breaking Bad. But yeah, so props to them for what they have to do and what they've been doing so far. But now we're going to move on to Best Protagonist. So my pick for Best Protagonist was 11, played by Millie Bobby Brown in Stranger Things. I just really rooted for 11.
It's hard not to, right? I mean, come on.
I really liked her. I really liked the kind of like endearing
It's like nobody's going to watch Stranger Things and think, God, that 11's so annoying. I hope she really gets like killed by these people.
It's so endearing watching her, like, how she becomes obsessed with Egos, or like, her crude way of communicating because she's just not that good, and the way she kind of latches on to kind of like the ideals of friendship and gets involved in this group really made it like somebody that I just heavily rooted for through the series, and just loved Millie Bobby Brown's portrayal as 11. Your pick was Supergirl / Kara Danvers as portrayed by Melissa Benoist in Supergirl.
Yes, and I thought, and it's a very simple reason. I thought she made the best protagonist. Not only does I mentioned Melissa Benoist do a fantastic performance in this show, like really above and beyond for like the type of show that she's in, but that like instantly made me fall in love with the performance. But it's also the character. The way she portrays Kara Supergirl is like, we don't see a lot these days. You don't see a lot of television protagonists who are purely moral, who are upbeat or positive. Everything these days is like so dour, it's like people
dark.
Are like, it's so dark. People are morally questionable. Our protagonists tend to be heavily flawed, heavily cynical, very cynical. A lot of these protagonists are. It's just, this is such a breath of fresh air, really. Also, if you want to, you can even take this one step further. You can contrast Supergirl with Zack Snyder's Superman, and you realize Superman in this movie is, again, he is like a dour, he is a dour person. Superman's not supposed to be like that serious. What the hell? Zack Snyder, Jesus. So it's refreshing. And again, and then the other half of it comes down to the way Melissa Benoist portrays the character, because think about it, a positive character, Supergirl could easily be annoying. She could be so positive it grates on you. She could be like so morally upright that it comes across as cheesy or makes you want to gag. But she finds that fine line and she walks it. She infuses the character with such humanity and warmth at the same time. There are dramatic moments, where she's upset or she's scared or she's supportive. And she comes across as genuinely human, and that also there's this undeniable
or genuinely
charm.
Kryptonian.
There's this undeniable charm to her that makes it work and raises it above the sum of its parts, to where I just felt really comfortable making this pick, which I could tell you no other character on a superhero show, any superhero show, Marvel or DC, was even in consideration for this award. So that's pretty damn high praise.
Not Felicity?
Right, oh, yeah. Well, Felicity was runner-up.
Speaking of dark and dour, edgy characters as protagonists, the other two picks we wanted to bring up for
Tyson loves his dark and dour, edgy protagonists.
The other two we wanted to bring up as potentials for this category as well are Elliot, played by Rami Malek in Mr. Robot, and Sansa, played by Sophie Turner in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Both had great arcs. We've talked to death about Elliot.
I think by this point we haven't mentioned Sansa too much. She has this great arc where for pretty much the entire series since it begins, she's like just constantly the victim. She's constantly a victim of circumstances and the people around her, like just victimizing the shit out of her. And this is the season where she finally gets her comeuppance. She gets out of the horrible situation she's put in, and she finds her own agency, and well, she does something massively fucked up to the guy who massively fucked her up. I mean, you go more in depth. It's my most satisfying scene, but seeing Sansa finally get some form of comeuppance for all the shit that she's been through the entire series, that's just great.
And that brings us to Best Antagonist. My pick for Best Antagonist being her very tormentor.
Yes.
Ramsay Bolton, formerly Ramsay Snow, but he became recognized.
He became recognized as a Bolton through murder and shit and being a fucking asshole. Of course.
As portrayed by Ewan Rowan in Game of Thrones.
Oh my god, yeah. Ewan Rowan. Now every time I see that actor's face, I'm gonna want to just punch it.
Which is so funny because this is like the only like really evil role he's had. Like I've seen him in like things before Game of Thrones, and he's always like this very like nice, kind of unassuming,
I know. I saw him in that show. Oh, I forgot what it's called.
Misfits or
Misfits. Yeah, I saw him in Misfits. I instantly expected him to be a sadist. It's like he's not in that show at all. But as soon as I saw him, I'm like, oh, this guy is a sadist. I'm like, wait.
He's also in a show called Vicious. It's like a sitcom that stars Ian McKellen, and it's like about this gay couple, and he's like their neighbor, and he's such like the sweetest guy in that show, and it's so weird, like watching that and contrasting it with Game of Thrones. So
where he's like, I think I mentioned he's literally the most evil character on the show. Like,
he passed Joffrey.
Yeah, he passed Joffrey, who was the previous winner of if I saw that kid in real life, I'd punch him in the face. So
you have Batman to blame. He's the one that told him to become great.
Yeah. Damn you, Batman.
So, your pick for the best antagonist was another one I was considering as well, which is the Man in Black as portrayed by Ed Harris in Westworld. He was the one, like Anthony Hopkins, when they announced he was going to be in Westworld, I was like, oh shit. When they announced Ed Harris was going to be playing the Man in Black, and that's literally how they announced his character. Like when they said he's going to be playing the Man in Black on the show, I was like, oh, that's perfect. That is like, infallibly perfect. Like having Ed Harris playing this like evil like cowboy,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's just so awesome. I was so psyched for it. And then as like the first kind of promotional stuff started coming out, it was all the stuff with Ed Harris in it that was really grabbing my attention. So yeah, I definitely really enjoyed watching Ed Harris, in Westworld, but he was kind of a different type of antagonist.
Yeah, he was definitely a different type of, yeah, he was, it's interesting because he's not downright evil, but here's the thing about Ed Harris's character. He's not outright evil in the way like Ramsay Bolton was, or Negan was, or probably some of the other characters that would make this award. He's evil because he's evil because he's in a fantasy world that has no consequences to him whatsoever. So he could just do whatever the hell he wants. He's been playing in this world for years. He knows it like the back of his hand. He's done everything he could possibly. He's played the good guy in this world. He's played the bad guy. So, it's to him, it's just a game. There's no consequences. So obviously, he's a sociopath. And his whole deal is he just wants this game to be harder. He's bored with it and he wants more of a challenge from it. That's literally it. He's about as evil as you playing Grand Theft Auto. If you're running over hookers in Grand Theft Auto and you're saying to yourself, well, I'm not an evil person. Well, yeah, but when you turn on Grand Theft Auto, you kinda are. So that's Ed Harris in a nutshell.
Well, his character at least.
That's the man. That's the Man in Black in a nutshell.
Okay, slander the actor and say that he drives over prostitutes. He totally does not. I'm sure he does not. Some of the other picks we had for best antagonist, Negan, that's portrayed by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, also known as Sam and Dean's dad on Supernatural. But Negan is, of course, in The Walking Dead. He's just one of those great charismatic villains, that you get every so often, where you kind of, every scene he's in is kind of like, it's gold, and he also kind of became one of the biggest problems on this season of Walking Dead, because you get to that point where if you do have a great charismatic villain, it's tempting to overuse them, and that's kind of, I think, a problem that The Walking Dead had this season, where it wasn't his performance being off or anything, it was just that they were overusing it. Right. They weren't leaving as much kind of to the imagination.
Walking Dead was never a show for subtlety.
But yeah, he is right now, I think, the great charismatic villain on TV.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan is a fantastic actor, by the way. If anybody can play a great villain, it's certainly Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Even though I'm not caught up on Walking, I'm a few seasons behind now, on that show. So I haven't watched the Negan stuff. But I could, even without seeing it, I could probably say with certainty that I think that's a solid pick.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about Hive, from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., played by Brett Dalton. Brett Dalton's been probably the best part of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for the 3 seasons he was on the show. Or was it 4 seasons? It was 3 seasons, yeah.
You know what's funny? What's funny? Before the podcast, you said Hive, and I said, nah, because I thought you were talking about Hive from Arrow. The organization. And I was like, really? That made an impression? I was kind of baffled, but S.H.I.E.L.D. Hive makes a lot more sense.
I loved Brett Dalton on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's sad that he's not on anymore. It's good that he's not on, because if they found a way to get him back, it would take away a lot of what happened last season.
I'm glad they didn't bring him back for this season. That would have been real. The way he went out last season, it would have just been cheap.
Exactly.
If he's Brett Dalton just walks on and says, "Hi guys,"
I'm back.
Of course, it's comic book, so they could bring him back if they wanted to. Nothing's stopping them really. But I'm just glad that they didn't go for that. I'm glad that there's no rumors of him coming back so far. There's no indication he's going to be back at all this season. So I'm glad that they're just letting him rest. Even if they do bring him back later, at least it's not something they're rushing to do.
Yeah, I like that Dalton was able to play like 3 different versions of the same character, like each season. So the first season, he's like part of the crew. This, halfway through that season, he takes this heel turn where you find out that he was like a spy for Hydra, and he's in Hydra. And then, but he's still kind of like likable. You're still kind of like, I don't know, how committed he is to this. He seemed like he still was mostly like trying to, do right by Sky and stuff. Then second season, he just kind of went full villain. And then when he was possessed by Hive, he was this very different type of villain where he was like, Hive didn't see himself as a villain. Right. Hive wasn't even selfish necessarily, He wanted to be beneficial. He was somebody that like wanted to bring the world together in a way that, people don't want. So it wasn't like megalomania or narcissism. It was genuinely he thought he was doing the right thing. And I think that one of the points that can really address that was when he finally realized it was over and he was gone. He just kind of like sat back and had a conversation with Lincoln because it's like it was over, like he wasn't going to like throw a tantrum, it's too late. It was over. So, go out decently. And he did. And that I think made for a really cool final moment for Brett Dalton on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And an interesting turn. So, I also added best antagonists are great. So you always end up with like a lopsided list where you have less protagonists than antagonists. But, Odin Quincannon, portrayed by Jackie Earle Haley in Preacher, was super interesting in his portrayal. Hap, as portrayed by Jason Isaacs in the OA. This is a new series that came to Netflix that I brought up a little bit earlier. He is so good in that role. He's probably one of the best parts of the series. Cornell Cottonmouth Stokes, from Luke Cage. I think what made me like him so much is that, I was sad when his character died because he was a far more interesting villain than the one they replaced him with. He like Hive, he was coming from a place of less a villain. Like he got frustrated and angry and then became more villainous. But, when you look at his origin story, there's some tragedy there. And you look at what he was trying to do up to the point in which he just got full on confrontation with Luke Cage. And he's like trying to be like the crime boss that's like having the least collateral damage, So he's like trying to do things kind of the right way. And he just, everything around him is just not working out for him. And he's becoming slowly unhinged. And it's just kind of a tragic character for a villain, which I liked.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the Beast, aka Martin Chatwin, as portrayed by Charles Measure in The Magicians. Every time this guy's on the screen, it's tense as hell.
It really is. One of the most memorable scenes from The Magicians as a series as a whole is the very first time the Beast appears.
In the pilot episode, yeah.
In the pilot episode, yeah, because it's so freaky. Time stops. People can't move. In walks this monster. He has moss, like a bunch of moss for a head.
He's got 6 fingers on each hand and moss.
It's such an unsettling appearance too, The whole thing is just unsettling as fuck.
And he's kind of dancing as he's walking in.
It kind of comes out of nowhere too. Like sudden. There's no build up. It just happens. And it kind of like makes you go, whoa, what the fuck was that? And that's the reaction. And that really sets the tone for that character. So now for like the rest of the series, you are now very, like as the characters are, you are also very wary of this character.
Mm-hmm.
And they really did the best job possible setting that up and making the Beast like a truly terrifying villain.
Yeah. I think the majority of the tense moments I had on TV this year came from The Magician and were all related to the Beast. But yeah, let's move on now to most interesting character. My pick was Cassidy, as portrayed by Joe Gilgan, who is a favorite of mine even before that. I love this actor, and he's in like the later seasons of Misfits. I've seen him in a few like movies here and there, mostly like bad movies where he's like the good part. And now he's in Preacher playing Cassidy the Irish Vampire. He is hilarious. He steals every scene he's in. And yeah, he's got like enough about himself that's interesting that he's not just the comic relief. He's like this combination comic relief slash, like his whole own character. And you kind of, he has his whole own story, and he's caught up in like the stories of other people, but he's got his own thing going on too. And it's really intriguing. So he was my pick. Will, your pick was Robert Ford,
Ford, played by Sir Anthony Hopkins in Westworld.
Yes. I did not. I watched the pilot episode of Preacher, so I am familiar with the character, but I didn't feel like I could go that direction because I only watched that one episode of Preacher.
Mm-hmm.
But Robert Ford, definitely the most interesting character on Westworld. I felt like more than anything on that show, I was most interested in Anthony Hopkins, what was driving him, what he was going to do, what he was planning. Like I said, the series starts out kind of portraying him as this affable old man who founded the park, but
great grandfatherly,
this great grandfatherly figure, there doesn't seem to be much to him. But as the series continues on and explores him deeper, you find that there is a lot under the surface, and he gets downright sinister too.
Yeah.
To the point of, like, literally he has people murdered.
Yeah. He's the smartest man in the room in every room he enters.
Yeah.
And he's scheming, and he's a fascinating character. Some of the other characters that we had up for most interesting character included his castmate in Westworld, Ed Harris, as the Man in Black, who we kind of talked a lot about why he was interesting in the antagonist category. 11, played by Millie Bobby Brown in Stranger Things, who I talked about a lot on the protagonist part. Cottonmouth from Luke Cage, we talked about him as well. The Beast, we just talked a whole bunch about him on The Magicians. And but I want to say a little bit more about the Beast, which is, it was interesting finally finding out who he was, because they pulled the old switcheroo on us. They set us up to thinking it was going to be the author of the Fillory books.
Right.
And that alone, he was an interesting character, because he's like this pedophile that's like vile.
Yeah. They kind of reveal late that the author of the Fillory books was not a good person. He was a pedophile. He's a very evil man, who had actually discovered Fillory and was obsessed with it to the point of learning as much magic as he could, which kind of sets up for, of course he's the Beast. He's evil and he's obsessed with magic. And they do this swerve where the Beast turns out to be the child that the author victimized.
Mm-hmm.
All grown up.
Yeah, Martin Chatwin, one of the Chatwin siblings.
Yes.
Which makes him more interesting also because you realize, so when the Beast killed Jane Chatwin, that was Martin killing his sister.
Yes.
It adds all these little elements to it, like the kind of, and just kind of like the fact that Martin Chatwin got to Fillory by following, Quentin.
Oh yeah.
And
right.
Alice. So it's kind of like this, like, oh man, there's like all this kind of like stuff going on, these layers to it that just make his character so interesting through the reveal. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up, even though we talked a lot about him the last time. But another character we had under most interesting character is the Punisher, Frank Castle, as portrayed by John Barenthal in Daredevil.
Oh yeah. What can I even say? It's the
Punisher, he embodied the character, John Barenthal.
Here's the thing about John Barenthal's Punisher. Punisher was a character that we've all been dying to see in the MCU. We didn't know when or what form that would take place. I kind of predicted that it would be a good idea to introduce him in Daredevil's second season. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that the producers of Daredevil avidly listened to our podcast and stole my idea. Thank you, producers of Daredevil. I know you're listening to this because you're addicted to our podcast. But here's the thing. Again, it all comes down to the actor, the writing, and the portrayal. Because again, oftentimes the Punisher can be very one note. It could be, he's just this pissed off guy who wants to kill criminals because criminals killed his family.
He's like a rabid dog. Yeah, usually.
That's the Punisher. Again, John Barenthal went above and beyond because he injected the character with so much humanity, so much frailty, so much pain and anguish, and you realize, and he's not just like this, he's just not the soulless killing machine that he's portrayed, but he kills these criminals because he is very broken. He is a very broken person. He is hopelessly broken, beyond redemption. And you see the various attempts that Daredevil, that the characters on Daredevil attempt to heal him, to fix him, and he can't be fixed. In the end, that's the conclusion. So in that way, say Barenthal's Punisher is a much more tragic figure than the figure that's usually portrayed in other media. And it's very interesting take. It's a very human take on the character, and it really succeeds. It really excels. I'm so happy he's getting his own show. I can't wait to see what form that takes.
And I think we're going to see him in the Defenders as well.
Yeah. It's great. In my opinion, yeah, it was fantastic. One of the highlights of 2016. And I gotta admit, the only reason it's not on my list is because I literally only remembered that this was 2016 after I finished my list.
That's the thing about doing a ranking like this, is there are so many great TV shows now, and especially the ones that come earlier in the year. Sometimes it's hard to keep track. You also have a lot of shows that like split their seasons, so part of it's in one, part of it's in another.
In my mind, it all runs together, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes hard to isolate what's 2016. So, if anybody listening, if there's things where you're like, well, what about this? There's a good chance that could be something that just completely slipped our mind, or it could be something that we were heavily considering, but just felt it was outweighed by something else that was also amazing. There's just so much good TV right now.
Yeah, or I didn't include it because it wasn't something I watched in 2016. I'm sorry.
Because you can't watch everything. Yeah,
can't watch everything. But if you think you have a better pick for any of these categories, cool, totally. I might even agree with you if you brought it up. But there's a number of reasons why X and X didn't make X category.
Yeah, it just happens.
You can't please everybody. I just wrote my list to please myself. Really, I wasn't thinking about other people's opinions.
So next up we have Best Action Scene or Fight. Now you and I are in agreement. Battle of the Bastards. We already talked a little bit about this. Enormous scale pitch battle.
It was enormous in scale. It was also what made this the best battle on Game of Thrones was just because it has a strong emotional core. The stakes for this battle are probably the highest of any in Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones has had spectacular battles. Hard Home.
Oh, yeah. Hard Home, the Battle of Blackwater Bay.
Blackwater Bay. But I felt like this was, it's funny. It's a contradiction because it is a huge battle involving a metric ton of people, but at the same time it's also a very personal battle between two people. The stakes are very personal as well. So in that way it's kind of a contradiction because it's so large yet so small in those ways. And I think the emotional stakes to the battle really make it the best battle in the game.
Yeah, and there's so many amazing scenes in that battle. When they get close up and there's just bodies and people everywhere, and the fighting is so close quarters, and it's just stunning.
When you see Jon Snow drowning in a sea of bodies, and it looks like he's just gonna die because he's being smothered by all these bodies he's buried under, and
he kind of digs himself back up.
That is harrowing. I at no point went into this scene thinking Jon Snow has this in the bag. The odds are stacked against Jon Snow. This being Game of Thrones and this being a show that's not afraid to kill off Starks left and right as it pleases, and also being a show that's not afraid to have the villain win. Certainly made it clear that there was no guarantee Jon Snow was going to come out victorious at the end of this battle. So unlike with other media where you can have the smug satisfaction of knowing the hero is going to prevail, Game of Thrones doesn't give you that satisfaction because Game of Thrones has proven that wrong several times already in the course of its existence. So there's genuine fear here that Ramsay is going to yet again come out victorious. He doesn't, but it's thrilling. It's thrilling to see how it plays out. And there are many scenes within this battle that literally have you holding your breath with anxiety over the outcome of what's going to happen.
And
that's even saying, Jon ended up winning in the end. It wasn't exactly a happy win for him because, there was a Stark that died in this battle. That being
battle
Rickon.
Starts off with, again, that's the personal emotional stake. The battle starts off with, Rickon Stark getting murdered, by Ramsay. He starts the battle off with that. Again, it's a very personal battle that just happens to be fought on a grand scale.
Yeah, it's picking anything else, even to like go for variety, just would feel disingenuous.
Yeah, exactly.
This was just too amazing of an action scene. But there is one other one we put down for consideration, which is the prison fight involving the Punisher and Daredevil.
Yes,
this is kind of like a hallway fight, close quarters in this like corridor.
It doesn't hold a candle to what happened on Game of Thrones by any means, but it is seriously one of the coolest action scenes in the season of Daredevil.
And it's brutal as hell. It's just, it just shows how brutal the Punisher can be in his fight, like how dirty he can fight and stuff when he needs to. It was an amazing scene to watch. So again, cannot top Game of, it's just not even close. Like we're bringing it up as like, this is a good runner up, and it's like not even in the same league, not even remotely.
Yeah, no, not even remotely in the same. So yeah, that's how much Game of Thrones schooled in that category.
So next up, we have funniest scene. So explain your pick, Will.
Okay, my pick is not to go with Mr. Robot again. But okay, so here's the thing. Mr. Robot did a pretty funny thing this season. Usually the show is Mr. Robot is usually the show is the most serious show on TV, the most serious drama.
Dark and Dour, yeah.
It's Dark and Dour. There's very little humor actually in Mr. Robot. Like people aren't quipping or saying humorous things. They don't generally like to dash in humor in the show. So when this episode came on and this freaking happened, this was so far out of left field.
It was like 20 minutes too.
It was 20 minutes long. Like there was a point where I thought this was going to be like legit the entire episode. It wasn't, because when the sequence ends, we're brought back to the reality of Mr. Robot and how dark and dour it is. But for this 20 minutes, and I will explain this, okay, for 20 minutes, Mr. Robot becomes a 1990s TGIF sitcom. Literally. Yeah. Complete with a legit TGIF theme song.
It was actually written by the same guy who wrote the theme to Full House.
Yeah, and actually wrote the theme to a lot of other TGIF sitcoms of that era as well, not just Full House.
Yeah.
So you set the tone, and then the whole sequence is surreal, and then Alf shows up, like freaking Alf, like what the hell is happening? And one of the best scenes is like Gideon Goddard appears out of nowhere. Gideon Goddard was Elliot's boss in the first season of Mr. Robot.
At Allsafe, yeah.
At Allsafe, he ends up murdered at the beginning of season 2. So by this point in the series, he's long dead. But he just shows up in the stream sequence, and it's really goofy. He's stopping Mr. Robot and Elliot, and his family, because he's like a police officer or something, I guess. And then Alf suddenly appears and runs him over.
And then, says, I kill me.
Yeah, he says, I kill me. It's like, he drives off, and it's like, holy shit. That just happened. And it's not the fact that just happened. That just happened on Mr. Robot. That fucking makes it. That's my funniest scene, because who would have ever seen that coming? Nobody. It's amazing. It amazed me when I saw it. It amazed me so much. I was like on like Skype saying, "Did you see Mr. Robot yet?"
Yeah, Tyson? I had to wait.
I was like, and you had
to discuss that because I had missed it.
Yeah, you missed it. I was like, oh damn it, you missed something special. So that's how much of an effect that had on me. I usually don't jump on Skype and harass Tyson about TV shows I watch, but that was something I really had to jump on there and like just talk to Tyson about right away, because it was that amazing. So yeah, it made the list.
My pick was Not the Butt from the episode of Ash vs. Evil Dead. It is, if you don't like gross out comedy, this is not going to be for you. If you do, this is one one of the most hilarious gross out comedy scenes ever in anything filmed. I mean, it's probably the grossest scene in an Evil Dead movie, but it's a series. So basically, Ash is trying to get the Necronomicon, which Ruby hid in a cadaver, one of many in this morgue that he's visiting, and he has to like cut open the bodies to try to find the book. So he's doing this, and he's kind of getting grossed out by it. He ends up getting attacked by the bodies in the morgue, but not the bodies themselves, by the intestines in the bodies. One of the intestines of one of the bodies wraps around his neck and pulls Ash's head inside of the body through the butt. The whole time Ash is being dragged, he's screaming, "Not the butt! Not the butt!" As he gets pulled right in through the butt, and then ends up standing up and having to fight with his head peering through the open chest cavity of the corpse.
Oh my god, that's freaking amazing.
To make it even grosser, the corpse that he got pulled into the butt of had a Prince Albert piercing.
Oh my god.
Just for that little extra touch.
Yeah, one thing Evil Dead has always been good at comedy. Evil Dead, it started off as a serious, like, work, but then by the time you get to Army of Darkness, it started throwing comedy in there, and I know the series on Starz picks up all those comedic elements, and so and for what I've seen of the Evil Dead, it's consistently funny. That just sounds completely absurd, but everything involving Ash's adventures is absurd. So that's a great pick, actually.
It was, I was roaring with laughter through that scene. It was so absurd, yeah. But yeah, we didn't really come up with a good list of other
it's because
nominees.
I didn't really watch a lot of comedies like this year. Again, it goes back to everything we watch is so serious and dour. And it's true. There's not a lot of jokes, you're not going to find a lot of funny moments in Game of Thrones. You're not going to find a lot to laugh at in Westworld.
Here, I got a last minute pick.
Here, what?
Okay. Brain Dead.
Oh,
the scene where they figure out how to control the people.
Oh, yeah.
And they start making them walk into walls and stuff in the middle of the board meeting.
If anybody was worried about, I totally forgot Brain Dead was a thing. Damn, you're right. That was great. Oh, geez. I'm so sorry, world. But
I just thought of it now, too. It literally just came in.
That scene still doesn't beat the scene with Alpha Mr. Robot, because that's just holy shit. I think,
For a natural progression from funniest scene, we're going to go to saddest scene.
Of course.
This one, like with the Battle of the Bastards on Game of Thrones, this is another Game of Thrones scene. It is just nigh impossible to beat. It was such a well done scene. We're talking about the Hold the Door scene, which is simultaneously...
Felicity breaks up with Oliver.
Hold the Door is simultaneously a sad death to a beloved character, and also the origin of that character.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. It's pretty bizarre, because
that's what makes it so tragic and so sad.
Some weird, timey-wimey magic stuff.
So this episode of Game of Thrones was actually directed by Jack Bender, who directs most of the episodes on Lost. So this scene I thought was very reminiscent of something you would expect in, like, The Constant, for example.
Yeah, this was definitely on Lost. Yeah, this was very Lost-esque in that way, because it does play with time. Basically, the scene is, it's simply set up. Basically, Bran is kind of in a trance, having warged himself into the past. He's physically existing in the past while his body exists in the present, and they've got to drag him along because they're being chased by the White Walkers who managed to break into the sanctuary they were hiding out in. The White Walkers managed to get in, and they're killing and destroying everything, and Bran is just not conscious. He is mentally in a completely different time period period. So they gotta drag his body along to keep him from getting killed. And it comes to a point where Hodor has to hold the door to slow down the White Walkers so that Bran and Mira can escape. And so that's basically the scene. And basically what ends up happening is Hodor ends up getting torn to shreds by the White Walkers because naturally he can only fend them off for so long. Him holding the door for them is literally suicide for Hodor because it's not like he's going to be able to walk away from that.
Yeah.
And the way they have it set up is Bran is in the past, and he's in the far past where Hodor is actually a young boy. And we find out that Hodor wasn't always, how can I say this without being offensive? He wasn't always
disabled.
Disabled. Yes. He wasn't always disabled.
He had a name and he could speak. He was
had
Willis.
A name to speak. He was Willis. He was basically a perfectly normal boy. What happens is Mira is shouting to Hodor as he's holding the door. She's literally shouting him to hold the door. She's saying, hold the door, over and over again. So Hodor is at the door trying to keep the White Walkers, and he's having that command shouted to him. And at some point in the past, Willis can hear this in the present.
Through Bran.
Through Bran. Somehow, I'm not quite sure how this works, but Willis can hear it, and it triggers a seizure in Willis.
He goes into a warped state, his eyes go white.
His eyes go white. He starts seizing, and he starts repeating what he's hearing. He starts going, hold the door, and eventually it starts becoming contracted to where instead of saying hold the door, he's just saying Hodor, and that's the origin of Hodor, because from that moment on, that's all he can say.
Yeah, which is it's not just his death that's tragic, it's this. It's this, this is what became his life. This is why he was a simpleton. This is why he was disabled. This is why he couldn't communicate. This is everything about him comes from this moment. And it's the moment of his death is what made him this way in the past. So he's lived through this, basically being predestined to die at this point. And it's tragic. It's horrifying. And the moment in which you as the audience start to put together hold the door, Hodor, as he's repeating it, hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, that hits you. It's pretty, it punches you in the feels, pretty much, even if you had no particular attachment to Hodor before, I think you still will catch feels from this scene. It is very well done. It literally became one of the most memorable moments of this season of Game of Thrones.
Yes. And it's gonna be it's gonna be the one you're gonna see tons of t-shirts based on and stuff like that for the whole series. Yeah.
It became a meme. It became another Game of Thrones based meme. It made that much of an impact that this is a meme, just like the Red Wedding, just like any other major scene in the show. And yeah, it's clear the writers knew that when they came up with the scene. It's not lost on them. That was obviously the intended effect.
It's not lost on them, because they had Jack Bender directing.
I see what you did there.
So I only had one runner-up. I only had one runner-up for Saddest Scene, which was a discussion between two mothers on the show Rectify. One being the mother of Daniel Holden, the main character, and the other being the mother of the girl that he was accused of and had served 20 years on death row of killing and of raping and killing her. And it had put these two families at these horrible position with each other in this small town for all this time. And when Daniel was released at the beginning of the series, there was all this animosity from the girl's family towards him. But as the show went on and it started to become clear that in most likelihood Daniel did not commit this crime, that family was holding on to that anger as the last kind of refuge of sanity, basically. And in the final season, they finally started to let it go. show. And so they had a conversation between these two mothers at the end of the season where they're kind of like making peace with each other. And you begin to see how, as damaged as Daniel's mother is, this other mother is far more damaged. She has not been able to move on since the death of her daughter nearly like 20 years ago. And it's just such a sad scene, but it's not like a, it makes you cry out scene. It's like a scene that just kind of sits with you. And yeah, it's just a really tragic, sad scene. One of the things that's great about Rectify. So another thing about Rectify. Everyone go out and watch Rectify.
Yes, everybody go out and watch Rectify.
But next up, we're going to do most tense scene. So your pick for most tense scene is the showdown with the Beast in The Magicians. This is in the season finale. I have to say, until I came across my pick and reminded myself that the scene I picked happened, my entire list of scenes that were tense were basically all scenes from The Magicians involving the Beast.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one who came up with that because, yeah, the Beast is a character who literally, if he exists in the scene, he creates tension. He makes it the most tense scene. Because even I could even put the first time he appears on The Magicians as the most tense scene because that was some damn freaky shit. But this was even worse because at this point he is pretty much a known quantity. We go into this final showdown, knowing that these characters, even after all they've been through, still woefully unprepared to take this guy on. Quentin believes he has an ace up his sleeve. And did I mention by this point? Because
Alice drank a bunch of semen.
Yeah, because Alice drank a bunch of semen, yeah. By the way, I should also mention at this point we learned that this confrontation has happened at least hundreds of times and has ended each time with everybody's horrible deaths at the hands of the Beast.
And the time was kind of like rewritten by Alice, who kind of existed in a different time before her death earlier in the season.
Yeah, who kind of existed in a different. Yeah, she's been resetting time to try and find a set of variables to which the Beast loses, because in every permutation of this timeline, despite the various changes Alice makes, the Beast always wins. So it's almost like destiny. They go into this, it's pretty much certain death, so that already makes it tense. Then when Quentin goes in with his secret weapon, we fight, it fails. It fails, and it looks like everybody's about to die a horrible death once again, except for, Quentin's friend Julia, who, Alice drank the god semen to give her power to wield the dagger that can kill the Beast, but it turns out in this new timeline, Julia having not been accepted to break bills, because in every previous timeline, Julia has also been accepted to break bills, along with everybody else, but in this timeline she hasn't, and so this leads her down a path where she ends up getting raped by an evil god, literally. So she has this god's semen in her, just like Alice, so she's also able to wield the dagger, and while the Beast was able to foresee that Quentin would use Alice to try and defeat him, he does not foresee Julia, and Julia gets the jump on him. But she does not kill him. Instead, she wants to use him to help her kill the god who raped her. And so the Beast disappears with Julia and pretty much leaves everybody alive, although fucked up.
Quentin's unharmed.
Yeah,
Quentin's but just unharmed. Kind of like, mentally harmed. Alice is out. Margot and Elliot both seem to be dead. Penny had both of his hands chopped off. It's pretty dire straits for them.
Yeah, it's pretty dire straits for them. That's where we end the season, literally. We do not know the further fates of these characters from this scene.
Until the trailers for season 2 hit.
Until the trailers for season 2 hit. So it's pretty amazing. It was definitely, what a way for the season to go out. It definitely made my most tense scene of 2016 2016.
So my pick for most tense scene is from The Walking Dead. It is not the episode in which two significant characters died. It is the episode from the season before, which still aired in 2016, that ended with a cliffhanger. Now that the big episode where it was revealed who died and everything, that had some tension to it too, but I think that they kind of cheapened everything they had set up by making it a cliffhanger. Like I think it was the wrong move. And the cliffhanger, everything leading up to the cliffhanger, before the cliffhanger of the previous season, that was tense as shit. With Negan being introduced along with his bat wrapped in barbed wire that he names Lucille, and taunting everybody and making jokes and speaking like it's lightly as he's like picking it by playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo, which of them he's gonna bash the brains in front of them, and everyone's just crying and horrified. You know, one of them stands up and volunteers and he says, that's not how this works. You don't get to volunteer. You don't get to have any choice in who's gonna die. I pick. And yeah, it's such a tense scene. And, yeah, so that got my pick for it. Jeffrey Dean Morgan killed it as Negan. I don't necessarily like the way they continued on with that scene in the next season, but that scene in the season finale was scary as shit.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to move on now to most shocking scene. So Will, your pick actually came from one of our show club show.
Yeah.
Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders. I had to give a shout out to our show club show. Well, at first I wasn't even considering Peaky Blinders for anything until I found out that this actually did air in 2016, which when I was like, yes, because I had no idea Peaky Blinders' third season was actually as recent as it was, because we were watching it on Netflix. It came out
like while we were watching the first season.
It went up on Netflix pretty fast then, didn't it?
Yeah.
I guess, wow. Yeah. I guess it came out while we were doing the show club. So once I realized this was actually in 2016, yeah, it became fair game, and I definitely had to include it in these awards, given our show club. And besides that, I literally couldn't come up with a most shocking scene of 26. I tried my best. Nothing shocked me. Not even Game of Thrones did anything especially shocking this year, which is surprising for Game of Thrones. And Westworld, no, Westworld, you saw everything coming a mile away.
Yeah, and so the scene you're talking about is where Tommy turns in his entire family. It kind of came out of nowhere. You know there's some other master plan going on, but that didn't seem to matter to his family as they were cursing him and screaming.
Yeah, they were cursing. That was, I mean, it's not like I didn't just pick this because I want to include Peaky Blinders or like I couldn't think of anything else. It was legitimately shocking when it happened. I don't know about you, but I literally did not see that ending coming at all. That kind of blindsides you when that happens, you know? I was just like, wow. Like, really? Damn. And you know, you're thinking he has some master plan, and well, this is just part of a plan that he's cooked up. But the season ends and doesn't like leave you with any indication that he's planning anything beyond that. You just think you just knowing the character intuitively, knowing, you just have an intuitive knowledge that he wouldn't do something like that without some grand purpose behind it. But there's no indication of that in the actual episode when it happens. And and the season kind of ends with like Tommy like in the empty house, his family being hauled off. It's pretty haunting actually.
Yeah. And you can see it on his face that he's just like he's shocked that he did it.
Even he's shocked that he did it. So yeah, that was pretty damn shocking. And it's funny because Peaky Blinders doesn't have a lot of shocking moments to it, but so that was pretty wow. Yeah, I was pretty bowled over by that.
So my pick came from Mr. Robot in the scene in which we find out that through the entire first half of season 2, Elliot has actually been in prison. So you described this as something that you were not too happy about. But man, it took me by surprise. I didn't see it coming at all. And once it did, once you kind of like get it and you start kind of looking back, you're like, oh,
oh, okay. Yeah, certain things make sense, like the rules. Like he says he's staying with his mom and he's, living by the strict schedule and stuff. And it makes sense for what he's doing. Like he's trying to keep Mr. Robot at bay. He's trying to be in control of that situation. But then you find out, no, he put himself into prison, and that's how he was trying to control the situation.
Yeah, he was trying to control the situation by being put in an environment where he's extremely restricted and that he can't do anything, So in effect, he put himself in prison to put Mr. Robot in prison.
Yeah.
That's what he was doing. And it doesn't work because he does end up getting released thanks in part to Mr. Robot.
Yeah.
But if that wasn't a good attempt. But I don't know. I in the end I didn't mind the whole prison reveal. I just thought I just sometimes I don't like the way this show messes with you.
Elliot is like the ultimate unreliable narrator.
Yeah, he even admits as much in the episode because he's like, no, I would have told you, but I didn't think I could trust you to the audience. That's directed right at the audience.
Yeah, this is it's crazy.
So he readily admits to the audience that he lied to them.
Yeah, it's crazy. I enjoyed it just because it was so like, what the fuck? But then it made so much sense once it became clear. I think that's the kind of shocks that are the best. The ones that they happen and they shock you, and then you look back and you're like, I can see this now. I can see how these little pieces connect here. So that was my pick. Some other picks we had, the hold the door scene from Game of Thrones.
But
I don't think either of us gave it to it because we did it for Saddest.
We did it for Saddest.
But that was a shock, that hold the door moment when you find out where Hodor
comes from. That's true, yeah, when we found out the origin of Hodor, that definitely was a shock. You're right. But we can't do the same scene for Saddest and shocking.
Yeah. For the sake of variety, we skipped that.
Yeah.
There was also a very sudden death. There's a very sudden death this season on Orange is the New Black. I won't say really more than that, but it came very quickly and suddenly, and it was tragic, and it affected like the rest of the season, and everything else that happened in the season was basically a direct response to this. And it all kind of became a story about prison overcrowding because of corporations being involved in the prison system. And it made it more political, it made it more dramatic, it made it sadder, it made it tenser. Like everything kind of came together revolving around this sudden death. There was also a scene in Westworld. We had mentioned that Westworld was a bad pick for shocking scene because you could see all the big twists you could see coming a mile away. But in the first episode, there is a twist in which we find out that Ed Harris's character, the Man in Black, who we'd been led before the show even started to believe that this was a host. He was like the evil host character, that like all the stories would revolve around, and we were led to believe that Teddy was a guest.
That's true.
But then we have this scene.
The first shock of Westworld is that we find out that Teddy isn't a guest and that the Man in Black isn't a host, which I didn't even think of because my mindset was there wasn't anything really shocking on Westworld. They pretty much telegraphed everything that was supposed to be a shock. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, but that was you do make a good point.
But it's in the very first episode that occurred.
And I think that also highlights how much stronger that first episode is than the rest of the season that follows it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the very first episode of Westworld is a much stronger show than the actual Westworld.
I'd say like the first two. I'd say the first two episodes are really good.
Yeah.
And the show is still good all the way through, I feel, but it definitely started stronger than it ended.
Right, yeah, definitely.
But that scene was a shock in that first scene. I was like, holy shit, wait a minute, what? When that happened. So that was a great moment. Now we're going to go on to most satisfying scene. So both of our picks were from Game of Thrones, but they were different scenes. Your scene was the ultimate fate of Ramsay Bolton / Snow.
Oh god, okay, come on. You had to be like, this guy was such an evil prick throughout the entire time he was on the series. series, you just wanted to see something horrible happen to him. Come on. I mean...
And when Joffrey got killed, it wasn't nearly satisfying enough.
It wasn't nearly satisfying, yeah, because he choked on, like, some poison or some shit. It was lame. But this was hardly lame. This was, like, exactly how you wanted to see Ramsay is comeuppance because Ramsay is killed off in the most Ramsay Bolton way possible. So basically he has his sadistic methods turned against him, so it's very ironic.
And who turns them against him is important too.
Yes, who turns them? It's Sansa, who he took great pleasure in victimizing. I should say Ramsay's victimization of Sansa wasn't just a matter of shock and horror for the characters in the show, but it was also a matter of shock and horror for viewers as well, to a point where it caused a massive controversy. It caused people boycotting the show. It caused people who never even seen Game of Thrones to label it some sexist shit that they'll never watch. It really created this uproar, which I didn't expect at the time watching it, but it really caused such a stir. And I think in that context also, watching Sansa, who was the subject of that awful rape, get revenge for it, is also hugely satisfying.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also satisfying because the way in which he was killed is directly mirrored to basically probably the most horrific thing he did this season.
Yeah.
Which was murdering his mother-in-law and his baby brother.
And that's why I say he's killed in the most Ramsay Bolton way possible.
Exactly.
Because his thing was he loved feeding people to his dogs. You didn't think this guy could get any more sadistic, but he does, because we find out that he loves feeding people to his dogs.
The only way it could have been better is if the dog went for his dick.
Yes. Oh my God, missed opportunity there, guys. It's like, oh yeah, definitely. But it is an awful death. It's horrible. I don't condone Sansa doing it, but damn if it wasn't satisfying to see.
I do. I condone. So my pick was also from Game of Thrones, and it's not so much like a major scene per se as it is just finally, and that is Daenerys leaves for Westeros.
Oh yeah, finally.
6 seasons in the making. We've been waiting, and the last player is finally joining the board.
Yep, the last player is finally joining the board of Westeros. Yeah, I've been waiting for her to arrive in Westeros the entire series, and why the scene wasn't satisfying for me like it was for you, because this scene is simply just her leaving. She hasn't arrived in Westeros.
So you're saying the first episode of the next season she's going to go, oh, I forgot my laundry.
Exactly. She's going to turn right around. She's going to turn back. So she just left. It'll be satisfying when she's actually in Westeros and like fucking shit up.
Yeah.
So that for me, that's the scene that's going to be satisfying.
And that was so satisfying for me. It was like, finally, and you had that amazing shot as it pulled out, and you saw really just cool. The sheer number of ships, and then the dragons, like flying over. It's like, oh man, cannot wait. That was like this next season can't come soon enough, and then we learned the longest wait yet for another season. But yeah, so that really excited me. Besides that, our runners up are mostly also from Game of Thrones. Arya got some Red Wedding vengeance.
No, yep.
Arya kills are always satisfying. I think I gave Arya my award last year.
So basically all satisfying stuff happened on Game of Thrones and nowhere else.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying.
Last year I gave it to Arya for killing that one guy that, the one night that,
the one
where she used the faceless mask, and pulled it off and killed him. That was my most satisfying scene last year. This season, she gets revenge for the Red Wedding. Not only does she brutally murder Walder Frey, but she fed him his sons.
Yikes.
It's just brutal. Like, you want to talk about something that's going to be hard to condone. That's the one that's harder to condone. She created cannibalism. But yeah, I mean, that was insane. We also have
had the scene in which, remarkably, we got fully behind Cersei, a totally hateable character, because she just took out an entire palace filled with even more hateable characters. She just basically took out the entire elite of King's Landing in one fell swoop, except her. She murdered, all of the basically all the younger members of the I can't even think of the family name right now.
Oh, jeez. No, I get what you're
of the Tyrells.
Yep.
She murdered the High Sparrow and basically the entire Faith Militant. Just absolutely insane. She just blew up the Sept of Baelor. And then, some tragic events occurred with her son killing himself after it, and she crowned herself Queen of Westeros. So, huge power grab, very unlikable character, and yet the Faith Militant had gotten so hateable through the last season that, you're totally, cheering her on for getting her vengeance. And then you're like, oh yeah, it's Cersei. Why am I cheering for her?
Yeah, right?
My last pick for most satisfying scene came from a comedy series called You're the Worst, in which a character who is very mistreated and constantly mistreated finally has enough. He gets in a huge fight with his wife, and he decides to leave, and she's like, oh, everything's fine now or something, and he says, fine, and he looks at her, walks right up to her, and whispers in her ear, better lawyer up, bitch. And it was such a satisfying scene, because it was like, man, he's been just taking it and taking it and taking it, and now he's about to give some back. And that was really satisfying. Now let's go over best comedy. We're kind of closing in towards the end here now. So, Will, your pick for best comedy was Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
I tell you, that show makes me laugh harder than any other show.
It's so fast, and yeah,
it's so fast. The jokes just come at you rapid fire. They're always very clever. It's always very clever. It's just, it's one of the funniest shows.
And it's very optimistic too. So it's a nice show to tune in when you're.
Again, the protagonist is a very upbeat, optimistic, probably naively goofy and stupid protagonist. But I really adore Kimmy Schmidt's attitude and outlook towards life. I personally aspire to that outlook myself.
So what you're saying is you're going to wear a pink jacket and yellow pants?
Yes. No, but in a way it is inspiring, but it's just a great show. It always manages, I can turn on any random episode of that show and it will always manage to make me laugh like an idiot. That's why I picked it. I think a good runner-up would be Man-Seeking Woman. Unfortunately, I'm not caught up. I watched season 1. I've yet to watch season 2, mostly because of issues with the availability of streaming.
It's up now. It hit up on Hulu now.
Yeah, I just still have to watch it.
Yeah.
I didn't watch A Man-Seeking Woman in 2016, so I can't really.
Well, you did, but you watched 2015 Man-Seeking Woman.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't watch a 2016 Man-Seeking Woman, but I can feel confident that putting that in my runner-up, because that also is a very funny show. I did have a hard time with this. It kind of highlights how we don't watch a lot of comedies.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of stuff we watch is comedies, which is ironic because comedy is one of my favorite genres, probably my favorite genre.
A lot of my favorite comedies have ended recently.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the problem, is that Parks and Recreation ended, Community ended, so many of the shows, like last year that happened.
Yeah, and NBC and the other networks failed to replace those ending comedies with anything that could hold a candle to it.
Yeah, instead of comedies, they went more towards police procedurals in which an interesting character themed with a woman.
I saw what passes for comedy on NBC, and it's such lukewarm, awful garbage that would not make somebody with a laughing disease even chuckle. It's terrible. So that's part of the issue too.
So my pick was actually a show on TBS, and I wanted to highlight the network it's on, on, because out of nowhere, TBS has become like a leader in comedy. They've had like 5 shows debut this year. Like TBS like, would you ever think like, oh yeah, that great comedy from TBS? It's just not something you'd think about, but man, they've been pumping out original comedies like crazy, and my pick is one of those. It's The Detour, which is basically National Lampoon's Vacation modernized and made into a TV series. That's basically what The Detour is. It's a family, they're on this road trip, and stuff is just going horribly wrong left and right. They're just having a series of really awkward, weird encounters on this road trip. And if you like that, then I highly recommend The Detour. I didn't realize how much I wanted a show like that until I started watching. And then I'm like, this is exactly the show I wanted. I wanted like a road trip, accidental occurrences show, like where just messed up things were happening left and right as a group was traveling from one place to another. And that's what The Detour is. So along those lines, on TBS also had a few other good ones, including People of Earth, Angie Tribeca. I know you didn't like it, Will, but there was that Lost parody one they had, you know?
Yeah, it didn't click with me. I gave it like 2 or 3 episodes and it just wasn't clicking. It felt like I was reading like a crack parody of Lost, which basically, if nobody knows what crack was, it's a magazine that did pop culture parodies, but their idea of humor was like giving one of the established characters like a stupid, goofy version of their name or something and calling it comedy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah.
So I ended up kind of liking that show. They also had a series called Search Party that was really good, a very different kind of comedy. But the thing is all of the comedies they had were very high concept comedies, which is also something that's kind of unique, you know, that you don't normally get that much in the high concept comedy game. I mean, you get, you know, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is high concept, you know, but most stuff isn't. It's just kind of, oh, here's a relationship between 4 friends after college, or, you know what I mean? It's always something like that. And to see TBS really go after high concept is really cool. Besides that, Silicon Valley was great on HBO. As always, it's never not been great. The Last Man on Earth continues to be great on Fox. And South Park doing some interesting stuff this season. Went really heavily serialized, where all the episodes this season were part of one larger story, and it was really good.
Nice.
So let's go on to best drama. Right off the bat, my pick, Rectify. I've talked enough about that.
My pick, Mr. Robot. Again, also talked enough about that.
And our runner-ups are Game of Thrones, Westworld,
and our runner-ups are pretty much every other show we gave awards to, so we don't really need to go in depth there either.
Except to go in on Black Mirror, because
yes.
Black Mirror is one we haven't really talked about. We'll talk about a little bit more at the very end, but Black Mirror is a great show. Came back for an additional 6 episodes, kind of a mixed bag. Some episodes amazing, you know, great dystopian science fiction.
Yes.
Some of them
are
not so much. But yeah, I mean, this continues to be just a fascinating show, because even when it's not great, it's interesting.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Even my most hated episode of Black Mirror, I can't say wasn't interesting, just for the sheer what the fuck, why did they do that-ness of it. You know, it was interesting how they managed to turn a police procedural into killer robot bees.
So, I'd have to say that the 2 standouts, I know the standout for you was San Junipero.
Yes, I don't know. That just left an impression on me. Feels.
I know I liked San Junipero as well, but the one that I think hit me the hardest was Shut Up and Dance.
Yes.
Which was just, that was another one I was considering with tense.
Oh shit realization that the protagonist is a pedophile really makes it. You know, because yeah, for the whole thing, you think it's kind of silly that he's like that worried about people finding out he masturbates. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like, no, that's not the reason that,
See,
that freaked out.
As much as I like San Junipero, it doesn't feel like Black Mirror to me if
You're
at
right.
the end you don't feel dirty.
That's true, yeah. It has, San Junipero has way too much of a sappy, happy ending to be Black Mirror, doesn't it?
There's still a little bit of haunting in there at the end, but
There's still a little bit of haunting, yeah. Once it goes to, once it shows like,
the servers.
The servers, like how the whole afterlife works, like in a very cold and impersonal way. It's haunting, you know, even though it's nothing, it's literally just showing you the technology at work that makes that possible. Mm-hmm. But just seeing it with no commentary, it feels cold and impersonal and a bit haunting, you know? So yeah, definitely.
So next up, we're going to be talking about Best New Series. Will, your pick was The Magicians.
Yep. I thoroughly enjoyed The Magicians. What can I say about The Magicians? I would say it's got probably one of the best villains on TV right now. Only bested by the Man in Black from Westworld. And, you know, like certainly the scariest villain I've seen in a long time. I haven't felt genuinely threatened by a villain in a TV show as much as I have the Beast. Also, like, the main cast is great. You know, all the characters are great. They start off as seeming like they'd be simple archetypes, but then they go beyond those archetypes into being fully fledged characters that you root for.
I think the show's like really well balanced.
Yeah.
It's like there's horror in there, there's fantasy, there's comedy.
It's got a mix of everything. It's got excitement, it's got magic. I mean, there's not a lot more there that you can realistically ask for. You know,
it can be dark and gritty, but it can also be silly.
It can be silly.
I love the episode fairly early in where like it was all like in Quentin's head.
Yes.
And when he made Penny visit him by getting everybody in this asylum to sing.
Yeah. To sing. Oh God, Taylor Swift. Yeah, the Taylor Swift. Like literally Quentin, that's literally the joke. Quentin has Taylor Swift running through his head, and like Penny can sense that, or Penny can read his thoughts, and that fact even like sets Penny off. You know? It's so silly and funny. But it might, like the best shows, some of the best shows are so super flexible in that way, in the way that they can portray tone, because like Supernatural is another one like that, where it can be genuinely scary, or it can
and then be funny,
or then be funny or goofy, and it totally works either way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Supernatural is one of my favorite shows, because it can do that, and I think The Magicians have shown they can be flexible like that too, and I think that's why
they have a showrunner from one of the showrunners from Supernatural.
Yeah, it's good to have one of the showrunners from Supernatural, and so I think that's why I enjoy The Magicians just as much, and I think The Magicians is going to end up being one of my favorite shows going forward as well. Mm-hmm. So,
oh yeah, definitely from the trailers, I'm really looking forward to season 2.
Yeah, me too. From what I've seen, it still looks excellent. So I have no problem naming it my best new show of 2016, even over Westworld, which I did love, but I thought was deeply flawed at some points. So I had trouble like kind of naming that the best show of 2016.
Yeah, my pick was Stranger Things, which to me it hit all of my weak points. It's nostalgic. It's a coming of age story. It's a coming of age story that has that touch of the supernatural in it. It's just all of these things that I love all rolled into one, and that's Stranger Things. And the fact that it's even kind of short, that it's like this 8-episode show, makes it like rewatchable in a way that a lot of shows aren't. And that's amazing too.
Well, that's one of the benefits of being on Netflix and not having like a network deal or something where they would mandate a certain amount of episodes. I don't know if Netflix mandates like a certain amount of episodes themselves, or leaves that up to the showrunners or the producers. But
it's on the individual deals, because I know that the and Marvel Netflix shows are always 13 episodes, and they always feel like they should be a little shorter.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that's one of the benefits of being on a streaming service is you can have 8 episodes if that's all you feel you need for your show and get away with it.
And Stranger Things made great use of that. I think that I never wasn't enjoying it. Never felt like there was filler. It was always strong. And like my first reaction upon finishing it was, I want to watch it again. And it in that way, it felt like the movies I loved. I mean, you watch, The Goonies, and the next week you're like, let's watch the Goonies again, Like that's kind of how I felt about Stranger Things. And I think the shorter run made it more doable as something you could rewatch, but it's also there's just no filler. It's just good.
Right.
And, I think that was the biggest part of it. So I really enjoyed Stranger Things. That was my pick. You mentioned Westworld being one that was in consideration, but it just was flawed. I agree. Preacher, another show like The Magicians, very flexible, skips genres left and right,
Uh-huh.
the horror comedy, just absurd science fiction. It just doesn't matter. It's all over the place. It's like there's no rules. The rules are just thrown out. And, even the first shot of that series is like a 1950s schlock science fiction looking film grain as you see like a force traveling through the world, like through the galaxy towards Earth.
Oh yeah, it's pretty good. I didn't really watch Preacher this year.
But you watched the first episode, so you saw
I watched
that
the first one. I saw that scene. Yeah, I watched the first episode. Preacher had the problem of being on AMC. Again, it has the problem of being a show I can't easily stream.
It's accessibility.
Yeah, it's accessibility, yeah.
So we're going to move on to our main category, which is Best Show. Now, I want to say right off the bat, just because we picked something for Best Drama or Best Comedy, doesn't mean that that's going to be what wins Best Show. We wanted to kind of diversify.
I mean, that would be boring, guys. Wouldn't you agree? Come on.
So that doesn't mean that our picks aren't ones we've talked about a lot already. So for Best Show, your pick was...
my Best Show is something you would never guess in a million years. Knowing what I like, you would be like, what? Really?
No way. Yeah.
No way. And that's Game of Thrones. I know you're all shocked. I was shocked I came to that conclusion. Because Game of Thrones is not something I usually enjoy. Yeah, it was Game of Thrones. And again, I can only say we've talked enough about Game of Thrones throughout this podcast, so where if you go through all the categories I picked for Game of Thrones, those add up to the best show of the year. Okay, you got Hodor, The Saddest Scene, Hold the Door. You have like the best battle on TV this year was, the Battle of the Bastards.
Pretty much all the most satisfying scenes.
The most satisfying scene was Ramsay getting eaten by his dogs. It had the best technical, all that adds up to the best show this year. Game of Thrones, I feel, really had one of its best seasons ever this year. And I didn't want to pick Game of Thrones for Game of Thrones' sake, but it just makes sense when you come down to it.
You want to be genuine.
Yes, you want to be genuine. And so there it is.
So my pick this year was Mr. Robot. And I feel that a lot of the reason I picked Mr. Robot over like Game of Thrones is because in a way, Mr. Robot to me has become kind of like the new Hannibal, and that it's this very dark, very gorgeously shot show that is esoteric. It requires a lot of thought. It can be confusing, but if you put your mind into it, it's so deep. It's so layered. And I feel like, especially in season 2 of Mr. Robot, a lot of the complaints people have had about season 2 of Mr. Robot are exactly the things that made it my pick. It's esoteric. It's operatic. It's going in that direction, and I love it for it because we lost Hannibal last year. That was horribly sad. That was my best show, my best drama. I won almost all of my awards last year, and I was so sad for it to go. And now to have Mr. Robot, a show that was my favorite new show last year, go in this esoteric direction that Hannibal was so known for, was so good at, is just awesome. And I've been really enjoying that. So yeah, Mr. Robot for me. Some other ones we considered: Stranger Things, The Magicians, Westworld. I've talked about all of them.
Yeah, pretty much anything we talked about we considered. I mean, kind of be weird if we just decided a show we didn't mention at all was the best show of the year. And the best show of 2016 is actually Fuller House. Surprise.
Our last category here is our special category. So for this, each of us picked a category specifically to highlight something that we wanted to address that the other categories did not afford us the option.
Yeah. And I wanted to address the best episode of Black Mirror for the season because I didn't mention Black Mirror for any other awards.
Mm-hmm.
And while I had mixed opinions on this season of Black Mirror as a whole, that I felt that San Junipero was a standout for me, not just for Black Mirror, but for television as a whole that I watched this year, that I had to find a place to give it a shout out. And I really feel like there wasn't another category that really fit.
Mm-hmm.
So I just used the opportunity to make my own category to fit it in. And I made that category Best Romance.
Which if this was last year, it would have been Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter.
Exactly. Yeah, that would have been Best Romance, but sad. It would have been Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter had Hannibal gotten another season this year.
See, NBC, you're missing the sweet the sweet TV enthusiast recommendation.
Exactly. Too bad. So sad. But no, this was first of all, Black Mirror doesn't do love stories very often.
Or if they do, they're going very wrong.
Or if they do, they're going very wrong. This again, Tyson pointed out, this episode was very uncharacteristic of Black Mirror in that it doesn't go wrong. There is a happy ending. And it's more of a drama that occurs between two characters than it is anything. It just has the technological backdrop of like a man-made afterlife. And I think what makes this, like, it is a pretty touching romance from the beginning, but then what really makes it is when you get to the realization that these are actually two people at the end of their lives and they're facing death. And what that means. And the one character, Kelly, is trying to decide, struggling with whether she wants to remain in this artificial afterlife or if she wants to just pass on like her husband did, like her child did. And it's really poignant, really. Like, once you get to that realization, it stops being just like this simple love story between two young people. It becomes something much more poignant and touching. And it's hard to describe, but it's left an effect on me. If you look it up, if you Google it, you'll see it's left quite the impression on pretty much everybody who's seen it. It's one of the most highly lauded episodes of Black Mirror, probably one of the most highly lauded episodes of television this year. If you look at critics' opinions, I recommend it. Watch it. You will get overwhelmed by the feels. Go on.
I just say for my category, last year I did Best Anime as my category. I kind of wanted to get away from that this year. I wanted to do a different category. But then I said, you know what? I'm going to kind of take a look back over what animes come out this year, just in case, like as something major. Went back over them, saw one word, Erased. And I said, I cannot skip this. Erased
So your category was best show for weeaboos.
So my category was Best Anime. I picked Erased, which is actually an anime that I brought to our 50th podcast, I believe, for Advocates of Great Television. We did a round with you and Ed joined us, and we did what we normally do with Advocates. We all picked the show we wanted to represent and watched it, and my pick was Erased. And I was really into it back then, wanted to share it then, still want to share it now. Erased is a great show, beginning to end. It's basically about a boy who, he has this ability where when something bad is about to happen, time kind of goes back a few minutes or seconds or whatever, enough time for him to realize what was about to happen and prevent it. And he has this ability, and they don't really dive into like where that ability comes from or anything like that, because that doesn't matter. Because what matters is that through the use of this ability and through something you find out was in his past that
has made him kind of a little on the antisocial side that you didn't really understand earlier. He ends up going way back in time on one of his things in order to solve the murder of 3 children that he grew up with, in elementary school. And so he goes back to being a child in elementary school, and he has to figure this out. So this is like, this is part detective story, part Groundhog's Day, part like, time travel, set the future right type story. It's got like all these elements in it, and it's got fantastic characters, including a great villain. And it's just a fascinating series all the way through.
Yeah, nice.
And
I'll
so
definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, if anybody wants to check it out, it's on Crunchyroll. Yeah, that was my pick for that. So that's it. That's our best of 2016. One of our longest podcasts in a while.
Yeah, it's 3 a.m. now where I am. So it's kind of crazy. Yeah, it was the longest. Well, it was there were a lot of categories. I was actually kind of writing my article, like kind of cursing how many categories you put in this thing, because I was like, oh my God, could he have just like trimmed it down a little bit?
Just one category.
Just one category. Yeah.
But oddly enough, it's like best antagonist.
Yeah.
It's like the only category.
Ooh, I mean,
yeah. But yeah, so thank you everybody for listening. To anybody who did listen, you can check out our articles where we went over all these subjects and made our picks, and read kind of our more detailed impressions about why we made our picks, by visiting the front page, TVEnthusiast.com. They're 2 separate articles. One's Will's picks, one's Tyson's picks. And they're both there. So you can check that out. Until then, you can check out our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, as well as our site. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast. And the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So thank you everybody for listening. Night.
Night.
If you would like to voice your opinion, send an email to theweeklyset@TVEnthusiast.com. TV Enthusiast is a part of the Enthusiast Media Network. Stay tuned to TV Enthusiast and the Weekly Set podcast for more